With this Guitar Lessons for Beginners video, we'll show you how to name every letter note on the guitar. Along with fretboard diagrams and self-practice tests, we'll cover it all with the step-by-step approach. Now, as a beginner guitarist, you might be wondering, why is it so important to learn all the letter notes on the guitar right away? In my opinion, learning the letter notes on the guitar, it's the very first step in being able to understand how to apply music theory to learning. In order to communicate musical ideas, musicians rely on music theory, which is a system or a language based on the combination of numbers, letters, and words. And the more you understand about this system of music theory, the easier it's going to be for you to learn music. And that very first step for guitarists is to learn how to identify the letter notes on the guitar. The total amount of notes on your guitar will be the number of strings you have, and we all have 6, multiplied by the number of frets. On this particular guitar, I have 20 frets, so that's 120 notes we're going to be able to identify by the end of this lesson. The reason why we're going to be able to do it, it's a method we're going to focus on, not necessarily a lot of memorization. We don't care if you can name a note within a few seconds on any position on the guitar by the end of this lesson. The main objective is just that you can find the notes, and that's a very big deal if you're a beginner guitarist. So regardless of how many frets you have, if you have an electric, you may have a couple more. If you have a classical guitar, you may have a couple less. But this method will work with any guitar. And the method is based on a horizontal vertical approach. Basically, we're going to show you the names of the open strings, which is the horizontal approach, and then we're going to move up the fretboard with a vertical approach. And we're going to do that with the step-by-step approach, and probably in about 10 minutes or so, you're going to have it down where you're going to be able to name every single note on your guitar. Now, with the horizontal approach, we memorize the names of the 6 open strings. Just 6 letters, and starting with the top or 1 string, the letter names of the open strings are E, B, G, D, A, and E. And of course, learning a phrase will help, and this is a phrase I learned many moons ago when it came time to memorizing the strings. It's a corny phrase, but sometimes the corny phrases work best, and here it is. Every baby gets damp after eating. And one more round of that. Every baby gets damp after eating. And so, what we'll do in the next clip, we'll do a little sort of test where I will call off a string and see if you can name the open string. And with that, that'll be a great foundation. Because if we memorize the 6 open strings, we have our starting points for the next step. But before that next step, in the next clip, we'll review the open 6 strings. What is the name of the 3rd string? 3rd string is G. What is the name of the 5th string? The 5th string is A. What is the name of the 2nd string? The 2nd string is B. What is the name of the 4th string? The 4th string is D. What is the name of the 6th string? The 6th string is the bottom string. That's E. What is the name of the top string? Top string is the 1 string, also an E, however 2 octaves higher than the E on the bottom string. With the horizontal approach, we now have 6 notes down, and as we mentioned earlier, 120 total notes to name. That means only 118 notes left, but it's a lot easier than you think. We just have to work on the vertical approach now, which is counting up each string. And you can count up each string knowing the chromatic scale. So first things first, we'll go over the chromatic scale. and then we'll apply that with the vertical approach in the next clip. The chromatic scale is essentially the music alphabet. And so the good news with the chromatic scale is that the music alphabet only has 7 letters, A through G. The bad news is that there are 12 notes in the chromatic scale, but you only have 7 letters to name those 12 notes. So of the 12 notes, 7 of them are A, B, C, D, E, F, G. The other 5 notes are called enharmonic notes. Those are the sharp and flat notes. What we're going to do to start is we're only going to focus on sharp notes because they're pretty much synonyms for each other, sharps and flats. If we start off with sharps, technically you're still going to know the chromatic scale, the complete chromatic scale. And here's a good way to memorize it. For the chromatic scale, every letter note has a sharp note after it, except for B and E, bacon and eggs. And let me give you an example. We're going to count through those 12 notes of the chromatic scale right now. We'll start from A and ascend alphabetically. So the chromatic scale is A sharp. So A sharp is just as a legitimate note as A. A sharp. B doesn't have a sharp. C sharp. D sharp. E doesn't have a sharp. F sharp. G sharp. Those are the 12 notes of the chromatic scale, and this applies for all instruments. And after those 12 notes, everything repeats again. But as long as you have that down, that every note gets a sharp except for B and E, and you can count that chromatic scale, what we're going to do in the next clip is apply that now to the vertical approach. With the vertical approach, you choose any open string, you determine its letter note, and then simply count up the chromatic scale or the music alphabet from that letter note. So let's apply the vertical approach to the 3rd string. In fact, to start with the vertical, we have to go back a little bit and do the horizontal. We have to determine that letter note first, E, B, G. So the starting point for the 3rd string is G, and then we count up the chromatic scale, remembering that every note gets a sharp after it except for B and E. So here we go. We've got G at 0. The 1st fret would be G sharp. Now, as we continue up, we're not going to say H. H doesn't exist. Once you get to G sharp, the end of the chromatic scale, you just go back and repeat the cycle from the beginning of the music alphabet, which will be A. So let's go back and get a restart here. We've got G sharp, A sharp, B doesn't get a sharp, C sharp, D sharp, E doesn't get a sharp, F sharp, G again. We are now at the 12th fret, and if you have a steel string acoustic or an electric, most likely you have double dots at that 12th fret position along there, and that's why they're there. It's sort of like a landmark, a road map, whatever, that lets you know you have gone up a complete octave on the guitar. So if you end up on the double dots with the same note you started with the open string, you know you did it right. And then the cycle just would repeat again for as many frets as you've got. So we're at G again, then it would be G sharp, A, and so on and so on. Now, with this technique, you could actually identify all the notes on the guitar, slowly but surely. But let's apply this to another string now, just to get it down a little more solid. Let's do the 6th string. So, first we got to determine that letter note. E, B, G, D, A, E. The 6th string is E, so we'll be starting with E. Every note gets a sharp except for B and E, so no sharp here. We go right to F. So E would be open, then F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B, C sharp, D D sharp, E. I landed on the double dots. I started with E, I ended with E. I know I did it right. So if you were on a desert island with this method, technically you could still name every note on the guitar. Again, we don't care about the memorization of where every note is. The key is having the method. And if I were to ask you right now to name every note on the guitar using this method, slowly but surely, you could name, on this particular model, all 120 notes. In music, the term sharp means to raise a note to a higher pitch. So with the chromatic scale, as we go from A to A sharp, well, A sharp is always going to be a higher pitch than A. And with that chromatic scale, again starting from A, we went A sharp, B. Now the musical term flat means the opposite. When you flatten a note, you're actually lowering it a different pitch. So if we were at B, if we were to lower B, the note below it you could also call B flat. So let's go back it up a little bit with the sharp example. A sharp, B, B, B flat, A. So that middle note, there's no difference in its pitch, but you can actually give it two different names, and it's called the enharmonic note. You could call that note A sharp or B flat. And when to call it sharp or flat at this point isn't as important as just knowing that one note, an enharmonic note, can have two different names, a sharp and a flat name. Now another approach to learning how enharmonic notes work or how to name them, if I were to say what other name could you give to A sharp, remember when you sharpen a note you're raising it. So the enharmonic name for A sharp, you would simply ask yourself what comes after A in the alphabet? What's higher than A? B. So your answer would be B flat. What other name can you give to A sharp? What comes after A in the alphabet? B. Answer B flat. If I were to ask what other name could you give to F sharp? Well, what comes after F in the alphabet? G. Your answer would be G flat. Now, the opposite approach will work for flattened notes. If I were to say, what other name can you give to B flat? You're going backwards. You say, what comes before B in the alphabet? A. Answer A sharp. What other name could you give to E flat? Well, D comes before E, so the other name for E flat would be D sharp. Now remember, B and E don't get sharps. Therefore, there are two notes that don't get flats, and that would be C and F. In fact, you can, if you've had any experience playing the piano or have seen a piano, those notes that don't have enharmonic notes between them are the two white keys on the piano. There are no notes between B and C, and no notes between E and F. Therefore, there's no such thing as B sharp or C flat. There's no such thing as E sharp or F flat. In the next clip, we'll do another sort of self-test where I will call off a note and we'll see if you can name its enharmonic name. We'll do 3 in a row, and I'll provide an answer maybe about 5 seconds or so after calling it off. And we're going to do 3 notes, so the goal is to get all 3 notes in a row correct. Can you give me the enharmonic name for D flat? The enharmonic name for D flat is C sharp. Can you give me the enharmonic name for G sharp? The enharmonic name for G sharp is A flat. Can you give me the enharmonic name for G flat? The enharmonic name for G flat is F sharp. Now, even as a beginner, you can start using the chromatic scale to apply some guitar logic to maybe a few things you've already learned so far. For example, using an electronic tuner. Some beginners don't know to look for sharp or flat signs. If your E string was a little low, which happens a lot, a chromatic tuner, an accurate tuner, would indicate E with a little B next to it. If you don't know what the little B or the sharp sign means, you don't know that you're out of tune. So number one, you can definitely use a tuner a lot more accurately. Also, if you've been working on some basic chords, again applying guitar logic with the chromatic scale, the bass note for all of your basic chords will be the same as the letter name of the chord. Right now I'm holding a G chord. You may know a G chord has 6 total strings. You may also know that the bass note of a G chord is the 6th string. And if you're fretting that on the 3rd fret, that letter note is actually a G note. And because you know the chromatic scale, we can apply some guitar logic to that. The bottom string is E, E, F, F sharp, G. So we know that now the bass note of a G chord is going to be G, and that applies for all basic chords. Another example, C, 5th string is the bass note, applying some guitar logic with the chromatic scale. 5th string A sharp, B, and C. Knowing the chromatic scale is also going to help you go beyond the basics, because regardless of what style of music you wish to learn, the chromatic scale is a must-know for every guitarist. So whether it's learning how to solo, how to improvise, or how to songwrite, the chromatic scale is going to be the foundation when it comes to applying music theory to learning guitar.